Welcome, trainers. Let's see if the audio is working. Can folks post in chat if they can hear me okay? Axel, I see you're in chat. Can you hear me okay? Awesome. All right. Let's get started. I know it's been a little while since we've had one of these, but that's mostly because our team has been pretty much heads down working on getting everything ready for early access. But we'll try and sort of start bringing these back. At least give people an opportunity to talk through and ask some questions. And it'll be an opportunity for us to share sort of smaller features as we get closer to the early access. Just give me 1 second. Just going to pull up a list of questions. There they are. All right. So I've got a decent amount of content to cover today. Some of it is brand new. Some of it will be spoilers. Some of those folks that have been in the Trainers Club will already have seen some of this stuff, but it's a little bit of a shout out. If you're interested in early access leaks, you can pick up one of the Trainers Club badges and get access to it. It'll basically allow you to see all of the leaks that we're posting early, as well as get access to early drops and things like that. So let's kick it off with a little bit of a recap of where we've been and where we're going. So we've done, I think it's 4 community previews so far. They've been great for us in order to really help us understand sort of what's going on with the game, really optimize and make things more efficient. I think each preview we've gotten better and better. We've sort of gotten to the point where the main core engine is sort of vetted and working, and we know it works and it does what it's supposed to do. Especially with that huge boss raid at the end of the last community preview with like the 300 plus people, the servers weren't having too many issues. We found some issues on the client side that we'll address too, but for the most part, there was no data loss, no packets dropped. Everything was humming along nicely. So we're sort of at the point where we think we have enough of the engine built where we can get an early access out. And so we'll talk a little bit about that on stream, what the roadmap for the early access looks like, maybe a few things that we'll be throwing in ahead of that, and also some spoilers about some stuff that you might want to pick up on the way during the early access sales. So let's start with a quick transition over to the game so we can take a look at this. So for those of you, I'll also mention this before I get too far into the stream, we have started a new campaign that will basically, if you look at the top right-hand side of the stream, you'll see a sub goal. So we've started using Twitch more, and basically if folks if we get to 100 subs, I think in 30 days, we're going to end up dropping a unique cosmetic for players to use in game. So if you're interested in that, definitely sub. It'll probably be worth your while. As usual, the cosmetics will be sort of rare based on it'll be basically for the Twitch stream only. So the cosmetic will only be available for the Twitch subs. So if you want to do that, sub. And now we'll move on to sort of the next set of content. At a super high level, we've been doing a bunch of different work. One of the things we noticed in the last community preview, especially for PC players, was that there were definitely some areas of opportunity for us to sort of scale and change the way that the UI works. We're still working on some of the final polishing, so you'll see some smaller things that don't quite look quite right, but we're working through them as we go. The entire UI has basically been redesigned into blocks, so that way you won't have any issues with mobile scaling. And on PC, you get a new feature where basically you can choose to scale your UI. So you can, if you're on a smaller screen or you want to have bigger font, you can basically now scale your entire UI. This is sort of a stepping stone to some stuff that we're looking to do in the future where we're going to potentially allow you to scale individual pieces of the UI and potentially move it around so you can kind of build like a custom layout. So this is sort of the first pass, but it at least gives us the ability to sort of make the UI work a little bit better on everyone else's screens. Take a look quick at the questions. I think we had too many questions about this. So a few things we'll talk a little bit about. I know that there have been some leaks on the Trainers Club about some of the equipment. You'll notice here my Kryptomon is currently wearing armor. So that's a new feature that will be coming and available in early access. It's sort of like the armor system in Genesis. Some of the pieces may end up coming over. For now, most of the armor is going to stick with what's basically in the game. They're going to basically be game specific. But you'll have a full set of armor slots, so your typical head, chest, back, and legs. And then you'll also have a neck component, which will go live in World of Kogaea. 2 accessory slots, and then there's another slot that's still to be determined. So that's sort of a little bit of a sneak peek. We won't cover too much, but there is an 8th slot that will add some interesting uniqueness. I think some folks had actually hinted at what it might have been. It's related to spells, so it'll be interesting to sort of see how that plays out. But you'll be able to essentially switch between your armor sets. Right now, they're just sort of dummy sets that we created that allow you to essentially swap out the sets. It looks actually like I have that wrong. But they'll be in the actual early access. The armor will come from a number of different places. So you'll get some baseline armor from doing quests, just like you would in any MMO. And then you'll be able to sort of upgrade some of those or craft new versions that are slightly upgraded using the crafting system. And then there'll basically be 2 dungeon sets, 2 tiers of dungeon sets. So there'll basically be 1 dungeon set that drops off of the regular bosses, and then another dungeon set where the pieces only drop off the last boss. So there'll be sort of tiers of rarity in terms of armor. Obviously, we're using our typical loot table, so if you get an armor drop, it'll be much more rare to get one of the top tier sets off the last boss. The loot system is actually under development right now, and it will also basically be a roll-based system. So you'll be able to roll need, greed, or basically pass, and that'll basically give everyone in the raid an opportunity to roll on gear. And the gear will basically be shared across the entire team. So basically 1 to 2 pieces of gear per boss. People roll on them, and then that's pretty much how the armor system works. But yeah, you can kind of see like all the armor sets. It's using our proprietary Stitcher framework that we built. So basically they're just getting added to the model, injected, and then rigged on the fly. The trainer will also get a few new slots. They're locked here right now, but we'll sort of share a little bit about some of the other slots. I can tell you that they're related to riding and flying, and so those will get added. And basically, the armor sets will end up having battle stats on them. There will be four sort of archetypes of armor sets. There'll be a tank set, which is basically your sort of defense-oriented set. I know many people weren't using a tank during the dungeon community preview, but I can pretty much assure you that you will be using a tank, fully tanked with armor. That is 4 tanks. That is basically a tank element. There will be no way around it. We didn't have the armor in place, so we were forced to sort of allow a little bit less damage, incoming damage, and folks were able to outlevel and tank some of the bosses. But in the early access, everything will be retuned, and if you don't have a tank, you're basically going to get 1 shot. So there'll be an armor set for tanks. There'll basically be a elemental DPS set. There'll be a physical DPS set, and the physical DPS archetype is getting a little bit of a revamp. I think the last preview, we didn't see too much of its use. I think it's Ghost and Ground. but we're going to slowly start to bring the balancing up on it. We've added some new features to the engine. So there was that bleed mechanic. Um, I forget what it's called, what the spell is actually called. I should probably these things. What is that spell called? Gnaw. So there is a spell called Gnaw that basically did a bleed mechanic. We have added the concept of stacking. So Gnaw will now stack, and you'll be able to basically stack bleeds on a target that will increase the amount of damage it takes, and basically you'll want to keep that in uptime. There also are some changes, some spells that are changing for some of the physical DPS elements. So Ghost in particular, Ghost has a lot of control-related PvP type spells that are carryovers from Genesis, but those are being replaced. I don't have a sneak peek, but I can tell you that one of my favorite spells that we built was basically Ghost can now summon basically almost like a mini pet that fights alongside them for a period of time. So basically a little apparition um, will show up and do damage alongside you. So it's kind of like a passive type damage over time effect. And then obviously we'll focus more heavily on some of the mechanics of them. We are also making some other changes to the way that spell slots work. We are adding additional spell slots, which I think folks have heard about, but we are also removing the limitations and the forcing of a specific spell in a specific slot. So there will only be sort of one rule. The one rule is basically you'll only be able to have one ultimate. So you won't be able to have more than one ultimate equipped. But other than that, you will be able to have other multiple physical spells equipped. We'll be adding more physical spells, more defensive spells as well. And that's sort of the direction that we're headed. Obviously, a lot of this stuff came from feedback during the community preview and also some of the the testing that we've done on the PvP side. So we got a few sort of minor questions that came up, just general questions about sort of what types of things make World of Kogaea unique in terms of other MMOs. I think this is a super interesting question, and obviously is very important in terms of like figuring out what your product's selling point is. Obviously, we're pretty much the only Web3 MMO in the space that I would really consider sort of a full-fledged MMO. You've got Ember Sword, who's sort of been under development for I think like 4 or 5 years, and I haven't been sort of very impressed with the progress that they've made, but they're probably the second closest. And then you've got a few other games that are pitching sort of MMO style play, but for the most part, there's really not very many Web3 MMOs out, even though most of them say they are. We've talked about this before, but you don't just take a single-player RPG game and turn it into an MMO. We've been writing code in our engine for 2 years, and pretty much every single line of code is built specifically with the concept of it being an MMO, optimizing data exchange, figuring out how to synchronize things properly, what to synchronize when. And so that's sort of our main selling point is we are going to be sort of one of the only Web3 MMOs. I also think it's super interesting to think about the concept of a Pokemon style MMO. So there's not been, to my knowledge, any real Pokemon style MMO. The gameplay of having a pet with a trainer in real-time combat is something I don't think I've ever seen, except maybe out of the Hunter class in World of Warcraft, which is actually where we took a lot of our inspiration from. But the sort of unique style of bringing RPG elements to a Mon game is sort of where we differentiate ourselves, plus all obviously the asset ownership stuff from Web3, and just sort of a sort of very unique concept for MMOs in terms of gameplay. For those of you that play MMOs, you know there really aren't that many of them. They're very complicated to sort of build, and they take a lot of development effort. Palworld, I saw that was mentioned. Palworld's not even remotely close to an MMO. They basically have, I think, max of like 20 people per server or something, if even that. When you talk about and their map is tiny, obviously you can expand the map, but they're in terms of sort of MMOs, you're looking at a hallmark where you have thousands of people playing in a small environment, and that's sort of what we're looking for. Um, yeah, I've also seen Spellborn. Some of that stuff, it's really hard to gauge from the gameplay videos because they don't really release too much. Um, some of them are claiming they're MMOs, and I've never seen gameplay with more than like one or two people on the screen. And things start getting complicated above 50 people. I won't dig into the technicals, but once you get above 50 people, 60 people, somewhere in that area, adding people to an existing map becomes super complicated. That you really have to know what you're doing from a data sync perspective. We had some questions about, are we going to expand the map after we get all regions out? We've had some discussions about it internally. The we probably will. There's a lot of content to build out, even just in these 8 regions plus Primus. So I suspect we've got quite a large amount of gameplay content for at least the next 3 to 5 years, just within the regions that we have. However, for those of you as a little bit of a spoiler, that ones that don't know, Kogaea is actually a rip on Pangea, which is the original supercontinent on Earth. And so we do have some sort of lore stuff kicking around about additional continents that you may visit in the future. So that's sort of all stuff that's under development and nothing sort of been finalized. There's some questions about having additional unique pets in World of Kogaea. We've talked a lot about this. The pet system in other games is kind of interesting. I don't think we would ever do anything with like unique pets for combat. Um, the game is really focused on the kryptomon as sort of the heroes. So we probably wouldn't ever do anything like that, but I could see some mechanics where like you could collect small pets or something like that. It might be an interesting way. Some achievements, maybe stuff like that, that are tied to the creatures that you kill or unique, maybe some NFTs that you drop from creatures, rare creatures or something like that. Um, there was also a question sort of about the lore. This is, and we'll talk about this in a second. But we did a little bit of a sneak peek of the lore behind the battleground. For those of you that didn't catch it, this is what we're actually looking at is the first PvP battleground called Pikeland Stronghold. Pikeland Stronghold right now is designed to be 25v25, 2-team PvP. And so the concept of bringing the lore into the gameplay is something that I really love about World of Warcraft and some of the other sort of big MMOs. It really sort of gives you that immersion. And so the design on Pikeland Stronghold concept came from the fact that in our lore, there is a known sort of struggle that is occurring at the border between Bosco Valley and Cryonia. And so, in the past history of Kogaea, there was actually a huge battle that existed that occurred between the two sides. So, the Dendra Guard that are sworn to protect Bosco Valley, you've seen some quests with them during the community previews, and then the Cryonia Knights, who I think, if I remember correctly, showed up during the Winter Revelry event. I think there was a knight that was there. So these two sides have been at war for a long period of time. There's actually a deeper storyline, which I'm not going to spoil, that is the reason for some of this struggle. But this battleground is really sort of a sort of simulation or a throwback to that battle that occurred between the two sides that ultimately ended up creating the Great Ice Wall that you see on the northern side of Bosco Valley during the tech previews. That basically the Cryonia folks have walled themselves off from the rest of the world, essentially. And so this battleground is basically a base control battleground. I can kind of walk through it. So you'll find that this is basically the ice side starting castle. So players will spawn in here. There'll be a gate. Excuse me. There'll be a gate that basically counts down before the battle starts. there'll be two teams right now. I think my character's on blue, and my alt character is on the red team. And so you can see that they're actually targetable, which is something that you could never do before. The PvP combat engine has pretty much been added, so you can essentially attack the other players and the other kryptomon. We're still working out the balancing. You will be incentivized not to kill players. The players will essentially get a shield based on the amount of health that a kryptomon has. So essentially, you'll be able to, if you were to just attack a trainer without their kryptomon being low, you're going to do pretty much no damage at that point. We did also talk about adding combat stats to the trainer cosmetics, but we wanted to keep those sort of really just cosmetic, so we opted for a little bit of a different mechanic. So if I head up here, you'll see that there are these bunkers that exist. The bunkers represent bases that you can essentially capture, and so you'll be able to fight other folks for control of the map. There are 11 total base flags that are up for grabs on the map, and when you control a base, there's a timer that ticks. The UI is just not built for it yet. That's what we're actually working on now. There's a timer that ticks that will essentially give you points for the number of flags that you have captured. Um, I saw a question about pay to win, but I don't know how that is pay to win. That's what we were trying to avoid. Maybe it's just the cosmetics having trainer stats, combat stats, but we're definitely not headed that direction. You'll see from far away that the flag is also blue, so this base is currently captured. There will be a UI at the top. If you're asking about the Pinchman, if you're asking about the pay to win in general, there will be everything is going to be earned in game. There will be an in-game auction house that we'll talk about, and your ability to buy and sell items in game, just like you can in Genesis. Technically, we did learn a lot of lessons about Genesis in terms of mechanics for crafting. So, as many of you know, there was a whole bunch of people that bought a ton of scraps. Those scraps basically, people were able to aggregate scraps and create armor very quickly. That will not be possible in World of Kogaea. The items for for the things for that you're crafting, like if there's an upgrade system, you will not be able to sell those items. One of the cool parts about World of Kogaea is it's super split, and the new crafting system works with both in-game items and NFTs, as opposed to just NFTs like we had with Genesis. So you will be able to craft armor and things with a combination of NFTs and in-game items, and we have full control over the in-game items. So we'll be able to balance things a little bit better. You will also notice that there are shrines on the map. So for those of you that got wrecked like noobs on the community previews, you know that these are for resurrecting. There are 6 of them on the map. Teams will actually control the bases, control the shrines. So you essentially will capture their flag just like you would a base. The main difference is there's no points for capturing a shrine flag. You simply get ownership of it, so you can then resurrect at that shrine. The game will automatically resurrect you at the closest controlled shrine. So you can imagine that there's tons of strategies in terms of controlling shrines, so that way you control where your opponents will spawn and where you will spawn. If you don't control any shrines, you will spawn automatically back at your base. I suspect there will be lots of base camping, which is one of my favorite things to watch because it's hilarious. So I'm on Team Blue. I'm going to see if I can bring my other character over and show you that you can kind of control both flags. So all the flags start neutral. You can basically capture them for each team. If the flag's already captured on your color, you obviously can't interact with it. But you'll see basically here, I'm capturing the flag on my other account. It will turn red and be captured after 15 seconds. I think it's 15 seconds right now. Gives you a little notice saying the Frostbound Shrine has been captured. And if somebody else comes along from the other team, they can basically capture it back. So you can imagine the strategy here is capture as many bases as you can to get as many points. I think we're doing first to 2,000 points per match wins, and we're still balancing sort of the ticking. But I think it's like 1 or 2. I think it's 2 points per base right now. And so there's a number of different bases. I'll kind of walk you around the map. Don't mind the super speed, that doesn't exist. For those of you that know, this is just a dev environment. So there's a bunch of different bases. On the ice side, you can see some of the cool catapults and stuff, things you can hide around. There is line of sight on casting, so you can't cast spells at something behind a target or behind an object that's marked as sort of a boundary. This map right now it will seem a little large, but you will be able to mount. So there will be no flying, and we'll cover some of this. But you will be able to mount and ride your kryptomon if you have one. That is an adult at that point. But you can see that there's just basically a bunch of shrines, a bunch of bases, and it's sort of just a relatively open field. We do have a couple of things that we're playtesting specific to maybe adding creatures to the map that will give you points if you kill them, basically kind of like mini raid bosses that will allow you to kind of gain points with a different strategy. But we'll sort of play through some of that stuff. Most of the stuff is pretty straightforward. This is the Pikeland's Dendra Guard side base starting area. So folks obviously would spawn in here, and then you'd have basically a boundary that would open up. And so that's sort of a quick sneak peek at the new Battleground Pikeland Stronghold. So we're super excited about that. In terms of sort of strategy, we are likely going to be doing a small playtest. I don't think we will end up doing a full-blown community preview, just because of the timing of everything, where we're going to basically invite some folks that most likely Trainers Club members, so if you don't have a Trainers Club pass, you probably won't be eligible. You can pick one of those up on the marketplace, but basically we'll probably be doing a small playtest. We'll probably do scheduled times in terms of when the battlegrounds are actually running, so that way we can get a bunch of people in. We do have the ability to control sort of how many people, like whether it's 25v25, 20v20. We're going to sort of see how things flush out in terms of map size and how many people feel kind of hectic. In terms of getting into the battleground, the battlegrounds use our queue system, so you'll be on the main map and there'll basically be a PvP queue that you can click on that will bring up a list of all the battlegrounds that you can queue for. Obviously this first one will be the only one, and it will create the teams automatically. The queue system has been updated to also allow groups queuing, which I think it did work for dungeons that way. But you can now queue up as a group, or even potentially as a raid. In which case you can sort of bring a larger group of friends to play with, which will be kind of nice. In terms of stuff that's sort of under development, we've got like a mini little display for the top that will show you the two teams with their flags and the count of points, as well as a timer. I believe we'll probably have like a timeout, like a max time, since basically things could get kind of crazy if people don't capture flags, because the game would go on forever. But in theory, that should be something that we'll probably add just as a safety net. And that's sort of a quick overview. As I mentioned, we are working on some new PvP spells. I don't think they'll be available for the playtest, but the goal is to get them into early access. There is a lot of stuff, for those of you that have played other sort of MOBAs and PvP games, there's a lot of sort of what we call crowd control spells. So things like rooting someone in place, freezing them, slowing them, silencing them, all of the stuff that you would sort of see from your sort of PvP gameplay. The other feature that's coming that's PvP related is we've added the ability to basically duel other players, so you can basically target another player, use the duel command, and essentially fight them 1v1. You don't die if you lose, it just basically stops you at 1 health. But that's kind of a cool way to play on the open world map. Do some PvP and just kind of play 1v1 against other folks. Dueling was one of my favorite things in WoW, so I figured it was a natural sort of progression. So that's the that's sort of the features that we've been working on at a super high level. There obviously are tons of other things that are under development. We have the friend system, which was not working in the previous release. Um, that just showed everybody that friend system is now working. It's just under testing, so you'll be able to actually add friends. You can also block friends. Will won and lost duels be registered? So it does publish publicly if you won or lost, which is kind of funny. And then I think we will end up having achievements for duels. So you will be able to sort of keep track of how many duels you've won in that regard. But we haven't done a ton of stuff. We haven't really done too much in the way of sort of general tracking of stuff like that, but we do have that data. That's how our achievement system works, so we could kind of add some stuff to that later in the future. Um, in terms of other stuff that we've been working on, there's a whole tutorial and help framework for new players. So one of the pieces of feedback that we got was that it was hard for people to sort of pick it up if they haven't played an MMO before. So there's a whole tutorial system that you'll go through when you start the game. It'll be reviewed for most of the people that have played in the tech previews, but for the most part, it'll be relatively quick and painless. So it'll basically walk you through like the basics of movement, jumping. As you start to go progress in the game, when new features unlock, it'll give you a little bit of an insight into that how that stuff works. So it'll, for example, like if you unlock a new spell slot, it'll tell you what it is, and then like equip something. If you are able to have another kryptomon on your combat team, because you open that up, you'll be able to do. It'll sort of pop up and show you how to do that. There, uh, the other thing we've been working on is a complete rewrite and move away from Microsoft for our authentication system. So most of you have, I think things have been better, knock on wood, but things for a while were really rough on Genesis with some of the login system issues, and so we decided to move away from it. There was also a lot of limitations on it. So we will be, as part of early access, we'll be rolling out a new authentication system, a new account system. Um, Hopefully this will be the last migration we have to do. I know that we started with wallets and then went to username and password. But this will sort of be, this is our own homegrown system, so we can add stuff to it. It will allow you to create a username and an email to log in. We are going to be adding socials as well. I did see a question about the graphics being upgraded. Oddly enough, so yesterday, um, despite my knowledge of doing this today, we upgraded to the latest version of Unity in order to add our blockchain frameworks. So we've been doing a lot of work with blockchains and wallets. There is actually now, and I'll try and show this at the end. There's actually now a Wallet Connect integration, so you can connect any wallet supported by Wallet Connect for your account when you create it. The new authentication system also allows you to have multiple wallets, so you'll have a default wallet that all of your rewards are issued to, and then you'll have other wallets that will allow you to import assets for use in the game. So, for example, if you are basically if you want to keep your Kryptomon and anything else on an external wallet, but keep your other items on your game wallet, then essentially that'll give you the ability to do that. So we've added some of that stuff, but we needed to upgrade in order to upgrade Unity. And after I did the upgrade, it was noticeably better in terms of graphics. So I don't know if it's just me, but the fact that you said it too leads me to believe that some of the upgrades to Unity over the past 2 years have improved the graphics. Things just felt crisper and smoother. So hopefully that's what it was. Um, we've also been working on basically just early gameplay. So most of the work we're doing from now until early access is building out the quest lines, the content. I think we're at like 150 plus quests for the first early access in terms of what we're sort of looking at in terms of leveling. I don't know if that's going to end up having us be at level 10 or 15, but we'll sort of work through that. One of the tough parts about building a game on the fly and doing releases every couple of weeks is there will be some rebalancing. So don't be surprised if at some point you were, say, level 10 and you had a bunch of XP and then everything scales down or up or something. But we'll sort of take care of that as we go, so that way we can kind of keep the game growing and obviously moving towards what we think we're going to have for sort of a final product. I think I talked about the loot system. I talked about mostly everything. So why don't we take a look at the questions? So there was a question about when are we expecting PvP duels and battlegrounds. Like I said, we're going to probably, hopefully, do a mini playtest. I don't feel comfortable having it go live without that. That'll probably be sometime in August. There was a question about betting on battles. We don't have that today. I'm super hesitant to add stuff like that because of the gambling implications for it. It changes drastically, like what you need to do with like the app stores. So that's something that we've talked about, but it likely is nowhere on the list. Just see. I think there were also some questions about Kamon coins' role in the walk economy. So all of the Kamon games are focused. The game economies are all driven by Kamon. So I'm sure that this was related sort of to the PIM stuff, but Kamon's role in the in World of Koji is it is the only currency that's currently going to be used. There's an in-game auction house that's used for purchasing game items from other players. All of any type of creature comfort features, whether it's additional bank space or more kryptomon slots, all that type of stuff, guild charters, that type of stuff is all going to be based on Kamon. So if anyone wants to buy something from another player in game, they pretty much have to use Kamon. We will not be supporting anything else within the game economy. That being said, the marketplace will probably continue to use a combination of Kamon and like the US. I guess it's using a USD pegged Kamon now at this point, but Kamon is sort of the main currency that will be used for buying anything from other players, buying cosmetics. So we'll have in-game. The goal is to have an in-game shop that will allow you to buy cosmetics when we have special deals on them, that type of stuff. So that's sort of high level what the role is of Kamon. There were some questions also, I think, about additional chains. So obviously we recently moved to Polygon. Yeah, that's going to be on Matic. So all of our transactions will be on Matic for gas reasons, and we're also looking at adding the gasless features for purchasing too. So that should help things out a lot. Hopefully that will be there for early access, but we're still sort of working through it. We really can't do too much on it as it stands the way it is today. There are some questions about other chains, like Immutable, Ronin, Arbitrum, that type of stuff. We obviously are aware of the fact that there's going to be sort of game-specific chains. I think Ronin and Immutable, for example, are sort of two of the big players. Strategically, we are looking at different options. One of the nice things about moving to Polygon is Polygon actually has sort of a multi-chain supernet strategy. Longer term, our goal is to have our own chain that would be used for like all in-game transactions, that type of stuff. However, the ability to sort of hold assets on other chains is obviously enticing, opens us up to additional sort of player bases. The cool thing about Polygon, like I mentioned, is that they have this strategy where they're looking to create this supernet and aggregation layer. Both Immutable and Ronin, because they're Polygon CDK based chains, in theory should end up plugging in eventually. And that strategy basically looks like frictionless transfer of assets across those chains. So in theory, in the future, you should be able to send your Polygon Kamon to Kryptomon NFT to Ronin or Immutable. And so we're sort of not trying to keep ourselves locked into a single chain while still remaining sort of neutral for now, because we want to see how the Web3 industry sort of shakes out. There's a lot of change that's going to be happening as things start to scale, and we don't want to sort of lock ourselves in any particular place. Question: how was my holiday? It was nice. I got a little bit of a break. Got some time out in the sun, but obviously back to work. And we've got a lot going on the roadmap, obviously. So it's going to be a fun couple of months, and pretty much through the end of the year, I think, when all is said and done. So why don't we pivot a little bit? Let's see if I can share. There was a question about sort of what the roadmap looks like to early access. And so I wanted to sort of take a step back and take a look at some of the stuff that's going to be coming up, most likely in the August timeframe. So you guys some of you have probably seen this, some of you probably haven't, but we have this concept of early access passes coming. The early access pass concept is something that we went back and forth on. Most of you have heard that our goal long term is really to focus on a subscription model. I personally think that a subscription model is literally the only way for an MMO or a game in our sort of position, especially in Web3, to survive long term. If you look at sort of the way that current games work, it's a consistent struggle from the game studios to sell stuff to players in order to make revenue, in order to keep building. And so, from my perspective, that creates that whole concept of pay to win a lot, and there's just a lot of pressure on players in terms of buying stuff versus not necessarily being able to grind it, and just it sort of adds a layer of friction between the game players and the game studio, and it's something that I felt was going to become even worse in Web3. You already see it today. Like a lot of these people, game studios, Web3 games don't even have games out. They're already pushing NFTs, and to me that just feels a little bit wrong. And so we talked about doing a subscription, but it also feels wrong to basically require people to pay for a subscription before there's enough content to play. It's sort of a fine line that we try to walk between at what point is a subscription, a monthly subscription for 10, 15 bucks worth it for the average person to play. And so we came up with this concept of early access passes. The early access passes are a way for us to get a little bit of revenue to sustain growth and drive us forward during the period in which we have the game out in early access, but not quite enough content for us to sort of feel warranted in charging a full subscription. So these early access passes will be sold. There will be 5 tiers ultimately. The first sale will be just the first 4. And you can kind of see them up at the top. They have varying levels of rarity. They follow our sort of naming standard in terms of our color standard in terms of rarity. The green passes are going to be sort of that pass that happens after the early access original sale ends, and it's basically like the equivalent of buying the game on like Steam or Epic. So it'll probably end up costing somewhere in like the $25 to $30 range. It lets you buy. Doesn't really give you anything else, but it lets you play the game access. The other 4 passes are basically your ability to open up additional features and rewards, and they have increasing prices and increasing value. One of the cool things we came up with to reward folks that bought those more rare passes is when we do switch over to a subscription model, the pass will give you a discount on your purchase. So you can imagine that if you buy the top tier pass, you're going to get a pretty hefty discount on your original, so your first subscription purchase, and so that will give you a little bit of a way to take some of that money back and roll it forward when you do move to a subscription model. The way that the passes work is the passes, you'll notice, match up with the mystery box tiers, and the mystery box tiers will essentially unlock when you buy a pass, when you have a pass of that tier. So, and they open up all of the other tiers of boxes. So if you hold the highest early access pass, you'll have the ability to purchase mystery boxes of all tiers. If you just have like the blue one, then you'd only be able to buy blue boxes. We'll talk about sort of what's in those boxes shortly. And they will give you access to the game early. We have talked potentially about opening up access earlier for people who hold higher passes so that way we can scale into the game launch, but none of that sort of been sort of settled. We'll obviously add more details as we get closer. See the question about would a trial for new players be helpful? So we do plan, once we have a subscription model, to have a trial where players can basically play for a period of time for free, up to like an X number of levels. And then um, the idea is that you would get locked and you wouldn't be able to level up anymore. Um, it would also basically lock your progress. You wouldn't be able to open up new quests. You'd probably be able to play some basic stuff, but you're going to be pretty much locked out of sort of progressing in the game. So that's definitely coming when we move to the subscription model. We haven't talked about what that looks like as an early access model. I think from my perspective, paying 20 to 25, $30 for a pass in a Web3 game is almost next to nothing. I mean, I spend that on gas on ETH half the time. So I think I think during the early access, it's a little bit different than committing to like a long-term subscription. Um, so we'll sort of see how that plays out. If it ends up being cumbersome or challenging in order to onboard new players, we'll look and maybe do like a way for you to have a trial where you can get in, like you can't progress past level 3 or something, and you can get through like the first initial quest lines before you get locked out. Soul, I do see your question. So that's sort of how the mystery box stuff will work. In terms of what is in the mystery boxes, so we're still working through this. We'll talk a little bit about sort of the types of things that we're looking to include. There are a bunch of stuff. There's a bunch of stuff that's missing from here. To answer your question, Soul, there are unique cosmetics. The way that the mystery boxes work, is that the rarity of the items goes up in the mystery boxes. So, like top tier mystery boxes will be more likely to have super rare items. We have talked about also. We'll publish obviously the full loot tables for all of the mystery boxes. But we have also talked about having specific items that are not accessible in some of the top tier, like are only accessible in certain tiers of boxes, like top tier boxes, just to kind of sort of give people a lot more incentive to sort of get the spend on the more expensive passes. And so the items, we are going to have a bunch of cosmetic sets. Those we're still working on. The other concepts. So there'll be a bunch of other stuff in the boxes. Saddles. Saddles are required in order to ride your kryptomon. So there'll be different tiers of saddles based on, and they'll determine essentially how much of a boost you get on top of your kryptomon speed. So you can think of them as modifiers for the speed of your base kryptomon. Obviously, all this stuff will be balanced, but the faster the more rare the saddle, the faster boost of speed you'll get. The goal is to not make it game breaking, but obviously have a pretty even something like 10%, especially in something like a battleground, could have a pretty significant impact on gameplay. There will be wings. These will be coming later. We are going to be giving them out as part of the initial mystery box sale. I don't necessarily like doing this, but it's something that we felt really fit with the concept. The wings basically are the same as saddles, just for flying. So the way that flying works in World of Kogaea is you'll unlock each region. So there's a faction in each region. That faction has reputation. When you get to a certain level of reputation in a given region, you will essentially unlock the ability to purchase basically a pass, or to get a pass for flying in that region. That pass will allow you to fly, and then the wings basically are the equivalent of a saddle, and they will be both cosmetic. So the saddles will be cosmetic too. The wings will be cosmetic, and they will also determine. They'll also have a speed boost on them. So less rare wings might have a 5% speed boost. More rare wings, 10%. And the way that the flying works in World of Kogaea, because most of the Kryptomon don't have wings, is your um, Kryptomon's shoulder part, body part. In some cases, it's wings. I think for the Ghost Kryptomons, it's wings. For the ground Kryptomon, it's like these stone blocks. They basically disappear, and your Kryptomon while flying has essentially wings that are spawned. And there'll be different style of wings. Some will be sort of more basic wings, like these silver wings, and then you'll have sort of glowing wings, which will be energy-based wings. So you'll have, instead of having like an actual wing, it will have essentially like a wing that's made of energy particles. Some of it comes from like the Ashes of Alar. If anybody played World of Warcraft, it's one of my favorite mounts of all time. But it basically, they just look like energy particles that flap like wings. And so there'll be a bunch of different cosmetic wings. We put all of the samples here. Some of these may not end up being in the mystery boxes. Some of them may end up being purchased through Pink Moon Shards. Um, but that is something that we're still sort of balancing. There are also boosting consumables. These have been spoiled, I think, on um, the Trainers Club. I don't know if people actually knew what they were for, but the first one in the top left is an XP share. It's a sort of our throwback to Pokemon. So you'll be able to essentially equip this in an accessory slot for a Kryptomon, and it will basically give you an XP boost. You can move. You can obviously have one equipped per Kryptomon. Um, and then there are also what we call infinite use consumables. These things are kind of cool. They are essentially a way for you to create to have an NFT that allows you to not have to craft food or consumables. So, for example, they will scale with your level. So, if you have as you get bigger, there'll be more potions, different stronger potions that you can they will essentially scale up with you as you go, so you'll essentially be able to have an infinite use of the potions for food, for increasing your Kryptomon's HP between battles, and also increasing your HP and regaining HP during combat. There'll also be a bunch of redeemables. So the first one is probably going to be they'll probably be pretty rare in terms of mystery boxes, maybe only in the top tier. The first one is a guild charter. It allows you to actually create a guild. So it's an NFT that represents the guild. They can be bought and sold and traded, but you cannot create and have a guild without one. And then the second one is basically a Kryptomon slot redemption scroll. So by default, the game will allow you to have like three Kryptomon on your team. Not your combat Kryptomon, but your actual team that you can swap your combat team out of while you're out and about. And you'll be able to unlock up to 8 slots, so basically one for each element. And you'll essentially need these scrolls in order to unlock them. They will be sold in the shop, but they will also basically be available for free in some of the mystery boxes. The mystery box, I saw there was a question about mystery boxes being sold. Yes, they can be sold. So they will be NFTs as well. The general concept is you'll get probably at least one, if not a couple, with your early access box. So when you're with your early access pass, maybe you'll get like one of the tier that you're in for free. And then there'll basically be a way for you to purchase additional boxes if you choose. Those items will be tradable and sellable on the marketplace. They're NFTs, and then when you go to open them, they will basically be. So you'll be able to get something for them. So that's sort of the super high level of how early access will work. We'll do our early access pass sale, some mystery box sales, then eventually a mystery box opening, so you guys can kind of see what's in them. And then we'll sort of lead directly into the actual early access. The goal is obviously in Q3. So as of right now, that's what we're targeting, and that's sort of where we're at in terms of development. We'll obviously keep everyone updated as we move forward. I know we're getting close to the end of time. I'm just taking a look to see if there were any other questions I didn't answer. I know that there were a bunch of questions on Genesis. So in terms of Genesis, I think we've talked a little bit about this. There was a bunch of questions about like future updates and things like that. As of right now, we've basically just put Genesis development slightly on hold. We have a few bug fixes and some changes coming out, I think in the next couple of weeks. We'll be removing freezing. We'll be fixing the bug with the PvP server not connecting, where basically like Microsoft was changing some stuff on us. So we'll have that fixed. And that's sort of where we're at in terms of Genesis. In terms of longer term, I think we'll sort of see how things play out, whether or not we're going to add some development staff back in order to sort of expand on the game. I think based on what I've seen, the best solution for Genesis longer term is a focus on Battle League and probably in-game tournaments. So some sort of sit and play style tournament in the game itself. Obviously, there's a fair amount of investment that we need to do for that. But that's probably, if we do end up adding additional stuff, that's probably the next feature that we would look to add. There was also a question about automatic login. One of the nice things about our new account system is it will remember you for up to 30 days. So you can actually click remember me and it will remember everything for you and just log you in every time. After 30 days, you will have to re-authenticate yourself, just a standard security thing. Let's take a look at some of the other questions. Any chance for free X month subscription in boxes? That's something we could take a look at. Might be interesting as an option. I'll mention that with the team. That's not a bad idea. I saw there was another question. Where did I miss that? Free trial keys for ambassadors that stream it. Yeah, there's also some. The cool thing about the way that the system works is there's actually two mechanics. So the subscription piece is actually already working. The NFT early access pass is basically just a whitelist mechanism where if you have it, it ignores your subscription date. So in theory, we could give people X number of days of free trial before they had to buy a pass or something like that. That might be something that might be a way for us to sort of get other players engaged. But I'll take a note of that. That's not a bad idea either. Will super mons get utility in walk? So supers, as we've talked about, are there's only sort of two planned utilities for them. One is the boost for essentially your damage boost against all elements. So that is, I believe, already working, if I remember correctly, in World of Kogaea, but I'll double check that. And then we do have plans for a unique aura for them. I have to double check with the art team, but I think that was done. The concept is sort of like a multicolored aura, sort of taking from each of the existing aura kryptomon and adding to that. So there'll be a little bit of a visual effect. Obviously, the same damage mechanic. Are the amount of early access passes limited? Yeah. So the concept that we've been kicking around, we're still obviously in the process of balancing the sale, is the early access passes that are uncommon, rare, the blue ones and above, ones that are not sold all the time will be limited. The green passes that just give you access will be available on the hub for purchase indefinitely until we open up for subscriptions. That's just basically so that we can keep adding players to the mix. So the access passes will be limited. We're just still trying to figure out exactly what we're going to do in terms of the counts of different things. All right. Will there be team for trainers to match the kryptomon? I don't know what we're doing with trainers. Cosmetics may end up having auras on them. or at least visual effects on them. But we haven't sort of worked through that completely. I thought there would be some cool stuff that we could do where like your trainer could glow or something, depending on the cosmetic set that you have enabled. But that's just sort of the general stuff we're kicking around. So I think we've pretty much made it to the end of time. And so in terms of where we're headed, I think we've covered the roadmap pretty well in terms of early access. Stay tuned on Twitter and our socials for updates on things like the early access pass, the mystery box sales, the timeline for the actual early access launch, and then obviously if you're interested in leaks and things like that, pick up a Trainers Club badge and potentially be able to get into the playtest. But other than that, I appreciate everyone's time today. It was a fun little stream. Hopefully, you guys found it informative, and the stuff that we shared makes you guys excited for the early access launch. I know I am. It'll be interesting to have the game up 24/7 and just sort of see how we get through that process of consistently adding content. But obviously, you guys have been with us since the beginning, so we have a pretty good community here that will help us sort of get through anything that comes up. All right. All right, that was it, and I appreciate everyone's time, and I think we're pretty much done. All right, everyone have a good rest of your day, and stay tuned for the rest of the streams we've got going and other events going on Twitch and socials.